Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. Today we are going to be talking to one of the founding members of MKB, Olga Mecking, and we're going to be talking to her about her book, which talks about Niksen. Hopefully she will correct me on the Dutch art of doing nothing, and she has written a book about this and has spent a lot of time thinking and talking about it and helping people understand how to do it. Hi.
Hey, hello. So I'm sorry, my voice is a bit gone, so I sound really weird probably. But
No, you sound fine.
yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Well, it's good. It's so good to talk with you. I mean, I feel like we've known each other for a long time, and actually have gotten to talk face to face before, but not very often. So, and
True, yeah.
I was lucky enough that we actually read your book in my book club, which we do on Facebook. So I have gotten to read it, and we've talked about it some, but I feel like it's always something worth revisiting, and also like you had mentioned, now it's a Dutch concept, but now it's spread out to all these other places, which is really interesting. Like, is it different in other cultures, or how does that work? But maybe we could just start off with you. Go ahead and introduce yourself to people that don't know you, and then tell us what is Niksen. Am I saying that right?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I'm Olga. I am originally from Poland, but live with my German husband in the Netherlands. We are raising three trilingual kids. There are 10, 12, and 14.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and I'm a writer and journalist. I've written for the New York Times. I've written for many places about different topics, including parenting. And yeah, so a while ago, I wrote a story for the New York Times called "The Case for Doing Nothing," and it went viral, which is how the book happened. And yeah, so the article was called "The Case for Doing Nothing," but it was really about Niksen, and Niksen is essentially doing nothing in Dutch. I thought I am a linguist, and I thought it's really cool that the Dutch have one word for a concept that in other languages would, require more words, like to do nothing or not to do anything in English, for example, and the Dutch just say Niksen, and I thought that's very convenient.
Yeah. And even it doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, I remember we talked about in our book club that even when you say to do nothing in English, it's not exactly the same thing as Niksen. I'm trying to remember some of the discussions we had, but even I think, especially like in America, I know we always feel like we have to be doing something. So even when we say we're doing nothing, we actually aren't doing nothing. We're usually doing something. We're scrolling through social media. We're planning our kid's birthday party. We're sitting remembering what am I going to make for dinner. Like, we're not really doing nothing. So even though we can kind of say that in English, I don't think we really have the same concept really.
That's possible, and I think that's what you mentioned. I think that's a very universal concept because I've talked to people all over the world, and they all had the same problem. And just, I thought that, for example, people would feel guilty for not working, like Westerners especially, but often they felt maybe in other places they would feel guilty for example, not socializing or not going out and meet friends or not spending time with their families. So there's this guilt about not being productive or social or doing something, considered valuable to that culture. It was a big source of guilt everywhere.
It's interesting that we all have that feeling of guilt, even if we feel guilty about different things. Like, what's
Yeah,
valuable is different, but we all have that sense that we should be doing something. There's something
yeah,
valuable
absolutely.
to be doing.
Absolutely, and I think that's very human. Like, it's very, because in the past so on one side, on one hand, we had to be, very productive, because if we didn't collect food, we didn't eat. If we didn't hunt for whatever tigers or something, we didn't eat. So it wasn't like we could go to the supermarket and and do our shopping. But on the other hand, so that's one part. And I think that explains why we all feel so bad if we don't if we're not productive. And on the other hand, we actually are very, very lazy species in a way that we all about conserving energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to a guy who conducted studies showing that, give people the choice between taking the stairs and taking the elevator. And guess what most people would choose?
Elevator.
Elevator.
Yep.
So it sounds like a, contradiction in a way that on one hand, we feel so very productive and want to do stuff and do stuff and do stuff. And on the other hand, we're actually very lazy. So
Oh, that's so
so
interesting.
there's, yeah, I think that's both of that. But both of those things are very, very human.
Right. Well, and so why do you think, so you're talking about how in some ways, Niksen, that's a hard concept, even going back, through time, that we've always felt like we were supposed to be doing something, but why do you think we especially need it today? Like things being so fast paced, why is it important for us? And like, how does it contribute to happiness if we can kind of embrace this idea of doing nothing?
Yeah, so so when I wrote that article in the book, that was 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, there were so many articles about burnout. Everyone was burnt out and overworked and depressed because of it. And now I'm kind of thinking, oh, that was 2019 when we didn't know what burnout was, right? Like, after the pandemic.
That's
So
true.
yeah, but there were so many articles about these things, and people were trying to find ways, because people were overworked everywhere, not just in the US but also in Europe, and that Dutch people are usually considered very, how they don't work full time often, or how they kind of often go home early from work. Even the Dutch were kind of, Europe with its kind of healthcare and work condition and stuff. Everyone was burnout and depressed and overworked and miserable. And so even at the time, there were people writing about, books and articles about the benefits of laziness, or the benefits of boredom, or the benefits of procrastination even. Things that used to have this negative connotation of being, lazy. Oh, you're lazy. No, you're a bad person. But people were trying to reclaim that, saying, no, I'm not lazy. There's even a relatively new book called Laziness Does Not Exist. It's a very cool book. Yeah, and kind of my article in the book kind of fit into that time where everyone was trying to find ways out of overwork and burnout. And also at the time, to go back to this idea of Niksen, at that time, wellness trends from other countries were super, super popular. I think it started with the Danish hygge, and there was a Japanese thing called ikigai, which is about finding your purpose.
Mm.
And those concepts started getting lots of traction in American media. And it was, Danish this and Italian that and Japanese this. And Niksen also fit into that kind of, we have trends from the Netherlands, we have trends from Japan, we have trends from Finland, now we have trends from the Netherlands, right?
Right.
So it really fit well to that. So that was the background in which the book happened. And why it's important now, we just been through a pandemic, and it's not really over. So cases are rising here again. Mm-hmm. And one thing I really liked hearing in the pandemic is that we could use it as time to consider, who do we want to be when this is over?
Right.
And I think Niksen, doing nothing, slowing down, it can really help you realize that, I think.
Yeah, and on another channel for Read Your World, I interview a lot of authors, and I cannot tell you how many people tell me that they've always wanted to write, and they finally got to do it starting in 2020. So many people, like, they started, or they wanted to start a business and they finally did it in 2020, because like you said, I think people, when they finally did slow down, it took a lot of, it let people kind of reprioritize, like you said, like, who do I want to be when this is over? What's most important to me when everything is turned upside down and everything, and there was that moment of like possibility for change. Although I don't know if if we still feel that, at least not here. I'm not sure. I mean, I think there was that moment, and so if you were able to pivot and do it, and during that time, then you could, and if you didn't, then that, I think for a lot of people, it feels like that time, that window kind of closed. I don't know. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think it's very much back to normal or back to how it used to be, or yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel, have you tried doing it for yourself? I know you did, you had, but like at the time when your book first came out, but it came out in 2020, right? So,
In the Netherlands, 2019, yeah, 2020, and actually in the Netherlands it came out a week after lockdown, after the first lockdown. So
wow.
it was very, very, very weird time to have written a book. And I was actually very worried that it wouldn't sell because of that time, because people wouldn't be able to go to bookstores, and people wouldn't be able to buy books. Yeah, I think it kind of, but then I would get calls from journalists and from Dutch media, and they were like, oh no, it's very, very timely.
Right. Well, I think people had more time to more time to read. A lot of people did, but
Yes, yeah.
mhm. Well, I think for a lot of it's like it is kind of, it's hard for us to, especially now, like during the pandemic, maybe there was this moment when people kind of had this idea of slowing down and not doing as much. But now it seems kind of, it's hard for us to get away from that idea of busyness. And although, like you said, like that can look different in different cultures, but do you have tips for people for how to kind of slow down and embrace doing nothing?
Yeah, so a lot depends on what kind of person you are, because there are people who really like scheduling stuff.
Mm,
And for those people, it could be really helpful to schedule Niksen time,
right.
because no, it's really because in our agendas we schedule important things, right?
Mhm.
Whatever gets scheduled gets done.
Right.
And so if you write down, meeting, conference, meeting, project, whatever, Niksen time, that's gonna get done,
I think that's
right?
me.
Or
Or if it's on my to-do list. Do your
yeah,
Niksen time. Okay, I
exactly.
can check it off. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, yeah, exactly. So if that works, that works, right? And also there are so many moments during the day when, I don't know, you're going somewhere, I'm going somewhere, taking the bus somewhere, or I'm taking the tram somewhere, or a train. A lot of it happens by public transport because you don't do anything, you just sit there, right? You sit there, you look out at the window, you see how the landscape is changing, you watch people out of the window, and those are really great times for doing nothing. It's a bit more spontaneous, but it's those are really great moments. Or when you're sitting at the doctor's practice, and in the waiting room, and waiting for the doctors to see you, that would be a great moment for Niksen. You're queuing up at the supermarket, and you want to pay for your stuff. Great moment for Niksen.
What strikes me as listening to this is, well, you're talking about these moments where it's a great time for Niksen, and I think, well, what do I do when I'm standing in line at the grocery store? I'm waiting at the doctor's office, and what do I see everybody else do? Is we're all on our phones. So in a way, I feel
Yeah.
like having our phones, because we have that, and I see this with kids a lot too. It's like we have this constant source for entertainment or communication. I think that had more than, because it's like invaded all of those little nooks and crannies where we used to have just free time for Niksen. I feel like we're doing it even less because I can just pull out my phone and I can work, or I can watch a funny video, or I can do, so we don't have as much of that kind of extra space.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true. Although in the book I talk about something I call the Niksen approach,
Mm-hmm.
which would be, for example, you know, everything we do has to have, like, we expect everything we do to have some sort of output.
Mm.
or some sort of measurable effect. So even, for example, we don't go for walks. No, we have to get our 10,000 steps a day
Right.
every day.
Mm-hmm.
We don't eat because it tastes good. We eat because we need our proteins and we need it's our vitamins and because it's healthy. And so, for example, my brother runs marathons sometimes, and he also goes running. He likes it, right? And so the difference between a Niksen approach and not would be if he goes running because he's training for a marathon, that would not be the Niksen approach. If he goes running because he feels like it and he likes it, that would be the Nixon approach. And also because of the brain, of the way our brains work, it's very hard to just do nothing. Like it doesn't happen. Mostly it would happen between, you would think about something or you would do nothing and then you get an idea. Because that's how it works. That's why we have our best ideas in the shower, in the bathtub, not when we focus on solving a problem, no. It's always in those moments where we kind of focus on something else entirely or not focus at all. And I would actually say sometimes, for example, if you're watching a TV series on your phone, right? But you're spacing out, you're not following the story. I think for me, that would be Nixon.
Hmm. So
Because
it's not
you're not
necessarily
following the
that you're
story.
physically doing nothing. It's more that you're doing it without purpose, or you're kind of not engaged with it, kind of.
Yeah, it could be that. It just I don't wanna, I often feel even with those wellness books and wellness articles, people are like, oh, I'm not mindful enough, or I'm not whatever, whatever the article is about, people feel that they're gonna fail at it or they're failing at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we look at the way we spend our days, I think we kind of do more nothing than we would expect.
Hmm. That's interesting. And do you think one of the things that we had kind of chatted about before was how the idea of Niksen, it was a Dutch concept, but it spread to other countries. And you mentioned a little bit about how in different cultures we have different things that we feel like we should be doing, like being productive or being social or helping other people. But can you tell us a little bit about what happens as this concept of Niksen has spread? What does it look like in different cultures? And what do you think the future of it is?
Yeah, so as I said, I'm a linguist, I studied it and I just love learning and different languages. And when I heard Nixon, I actually started looking at similar expressions in other languages.
Mm,
And then it turned out, so for example, in Polish, we would call it to lie down with your belly up.
I like that.
Or in yeah, so in Dutch they have Niksen, but they also have Leieren, which means too lazy, like too lazy around.
Mm,
The Italians, of course, have dolce far niente, sweet doing nothing.
mm,
Um, and for example, so maybe in French there's no similar thing, I think, but they have the concept of flaneur, which is someone who goes for a walk without purpose, without a goal, without a reason, just walking around Paris, for example, right? So everywhere I looked, I saw maybe not exactly the same thing, but similar things. So there, wherever I looked, even in English, you have this concept of a lazy Sunday afternoon,
right,
right?
right.
So, and actually, religion also plays a role with that, in that, because, for example, in the Polish word for Sunday, niedziela, means the day where we do nothing. Oh, the day where we don't work. But yeah, so and many religions have a day that's kind of not for working, like
Right.
Sabbath, for example, in Jewish religion. Yeah. So it's Nixon may be at that word,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually a very universal concept if you look at it broadly. Obviously,
Right.
it won't always be doing nothing, but in every culture, there's something similar and something positive to say about free time or leisure time or not working or taking time off, something like this.
Right. Do you think that like we talked about your article went viral and your book came out just before, kind of right at the beginning of the pandemic, and now that things have gotten back to normal, do you think that there is still this interest in combating burnout and all of that? You were talking about how there was so many articles and so much interest in what to do about burnout, and everybody was feeling overworked. Do you feel like there's that same feeling that we've kind of gone back to that? Do you feel like people have taken any lessons from this concept like Niksen or from the pandemic now? Where do you think we're at now?
Yeah, so here it looks very much now trying to get back to normal. Even as people are getting sick, but yeah, like very very much back to normal. But I think I do hope that we kind of learned enough to be able to prevent burnout from happening, or work-related burnout from happening. It doesn't. Yeah, I don't know if it does not look that way. I just hope that we've learned our lessons and that we can say, okay, no. But there's books, there's new books coming out, maybe not necessarily about Niksen, but like books criticizing productivity culture. That book, Laziness Does Not Exist, I think it came out last year. So it's very, very current book. So it's not that happened that something before the pandemic, but something that is coming out now. So it's still relevant and still important, I think.
Yeah, and I just want to put in a plug for your own book because I think it is still really relevant. I love getting to read it. I know talking to other people in the book club, it was one of the favorite books that we read that year, and so I really love I love getting to read. And like if I remember correctly, it goes into like what Niksen is, but also has like a lot of little exercises or things that you can try to get it more to kind of introduce it more into your life. Like you said, like these little moments where you can find, or how to schedule it or whatever, find a way that works for you. So can you talk, how do people find your book?
Oh yeah, they can buy it on, wherever books are sold. And it's available in 14 languages and 3 different, 14 languages, including English, but there's also 3 different English language editions. So I guess you could buy it wherever you are. Amazon, obviously, Barnes and Noble, of course. It's widely available.
And the title, can you give the title one more time?
Yeah, the title is Niksen, Embracing the Dutch Art of Doing Nothing.
And I'll include the link when we post this on YouTube. I'll include the direct link to that and the title. But I also just want to say before we wrap up, for anybody who hasn't read Olga's writing, you really need to. When I was putting together like the questions, I saw an article that you wrote, I think pretty recently. Is it for Psych magazine about parenting books? And yeah. I just feel like you're one of the most insightful writers that I've read, just commenting on what's happening in the world, social, especially like you always bring in this perspective of like the gender dynamics or, kind of like the bigger picture to what's happening. So the article I read was all about parenting books and how you should be aware of what the background was of the so-called expert. Not that it discounts what they're saying, but that it can help you kind of understand more of where they're coming from if you know more about that. It's in some ways the parenting book tells more about the expert than it does necessarily about what you should be doing. So and Olga's written a lot of really great articles for us about, I think especially about parenting books, but about a lot of different topics that you have a very wide range of interests, which I love getting to read all of your articles. Is there something, do you think you're going to work on another book, or are you focusing more on the kind of the freelance writing?
Yeah, so all of that, I am hoping to write another book maybe about parenting also. I would love that. I'm also working on a freelance writing, and I'm writing a series of fantasy books, which I'm probably gonna publish myself. Yeah, so 3 are already written. There will be 5 in a series. So I have to write 2 more,
Mhm.
which is interesting, but really fun. It's very different from writing nonfiction. Very, very different.
Oh, I can't wait for that. That's so exciting. And then I should mention you also are you also did the your was it your grandfather's memoir from the
Yeah,
Holocaust. So you've done, like
yeah,
I said, you've
exactly.
done all different kinds of writing, and that was really powerful book to read.
Thank you. Thank you so much. No, I do like that because I get bored easily. So writing never bores me, but writing about the same topic all the time is,
For you,
it's
yeah.
not that I never write about it again, but I like focusing on different stuff. So I've recently written a food story about a certain type of gingerbread popular in Poland. And before that, I've written something else entirely. So it's really fun.
Yeah. Well, we love it, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. Like I said, I'll share the link when we post this on YouTube. I'll share the link to the book and maybe some of the articles as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. For anybody who's joining us late, it'll be up in a few minutes on Instagram and then later on our YouTube channel. So good to talk with you, Olga, and thanks for joining us with this time difference. It's for those that don't know, I think it's almost 9:30 in the evening where you are. So thank you
Yeah.
for making that work.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.